Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor. Thank you very much for joining us for these live broadcasts on the Car Dealer Magazine YouTube channel. Now, today we are running our special legal show with motor trade legal firm Lawgistics. And I'm delighted to say we've got Nona and Kirill from the firm. Hello, both.
Hiya.
Hi, James.
Hello. Lovely to have you both on again. Now, in this show, we're going to be talking about the flexible furlough scheme, the recently announced £1,000 bonus to businesses if they bring back furloughed workers and keep them employed until January next year. And we'll be talking about the unpleasant subject of redundancy. Now, we're going to be going through all of those in the next half an hour or so, answering questions which have already been sent to us. And questions which Lawgistics have been fielding on their helpline. As always, this is a live show, so if you do want to have an issue or a question answered, please do drop it into the comments box, and I'll do my best to ask it to the pair of them. Okay, right then, should we get cracking? Because we always tend to run out of time on these shows. Can I start with you, Nona? Can we just talk about this topic of £1,000 bonuses? Now, I mean, it hit headlines last week, obviously, because it was part of the Chancellor's summer statement. Can you just recap what it actually means to dealers, please?
Well, as ever, we don't really know yet.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
All we know is the headlines. People were brought back from furlough and they remain in employment through till January. Employers are going to get a £1,000 Brucey bonus for doing that. We don't know if that would include people that are already back from furlough or people that are brought back in October when the furlough scheme comes to an end. We don't know. And they've said it will be announced towards the end of July before we get any details. But it's interesting, there are already some companies who are saying we don't want this, because I think generally people have thought we don't see the point of this, we don't really see the benefit. I think Primark, they had 30,000 employees on furlough. They don't want their 30 million, they've said. I think John Lewis are going down that route as well. A company like McDonald's, who furloughed around 135,000 people, could come up with £135 million grant. Do McDonald's need that the taxpayers got to end up paying back? I don't know. So maybe now the government have seen the reaction wasn't particularly positive. Maybe they will just change that. So the answer is we don't know, James. Yeah. Other than the headlines, that's it.
But as I'm not criticising the government here at all, but it just does seem to be a topic that we continue to talk about. There is an announcement made, and it's a wide-reaching announcement. Obviously, it can't cover everything, but we in the motor trade are quite often left with head scratching and thinking, does that apply to us? Or how is that going to apply to us? How is that going to affect our businesses? And I do struggle to understand why keeping an employee in work until January should be sort of rewarded with this Brucey bonus. It just seems like sort of tinsel a little bit, trying to tart something up a little bit. I know that's just my personal view, but it does seem to be. I'm not quite sure how sort of useful it's going to be for the motor trade.
Yeah, and I think that's how most people have reacted to it. I think that's the very general view. It's what the point. Would you keep someone on because you're going to get £1,000 in January when you've got to pay them through November, December, and January?
Yeah,
I don't know. Would you not? So,
yeah.
Maybe the Treasury will take that feedback and do something a little bit different with it. Maybe, who knows? But end of July apparently is when we will have the detail for that.
Okay. Let's talk about flexible furlough, because obviously the furlough scheme has been massively beneficial to the motor trade and to the automotive industry as a whole. As it begins to wind down, of course, there are even greater questions being asked about the intricacies of the actual scheme. Kira, if I could turn to you, we've had a question in from Paul here, and he says, I have my sales staff working on flexible furlough. We pay commission 1 month in arrears, so no commission will be due for payment in July. basic pay only, which is below national minimum wage. I heard it is allowed under the furlough. Is that right? Is Paul right there? Or was he a bit confused? Like all of us.
Yeah, I'm afraid Paul may be in a bit of a difficulty here because that was okay under the previous furlough scheme. So you don't do any work. That was one of the key conditions. You don't do any work. Because you don't do any work, the pay could be below the national minimum wage. Now, if the employee does work under flexible furlough, the work that is done should be paid at least the national minimum wage. So if the basic pay falls below, the employer will have to top it up to the national minimum wage at least. Commission seems still to be quite a hot topic, and as you can see, that probably will apply to flexible furlough. Exactly was the case with the furlough scheme version 1, when the commission was earned before the start of the furlough, and then what to do with the commission earned but still due to payment while someone is on furlough. Well, our advice was try to defer, because that will put then the employees in a better off position. When they come back from furlough, start working, they will have the commission paid back on top of their basic pay. So that will avoid the situation. But to answer Paul's question, they'll have to top it up.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a big issue, and I'm sure it must be causing dealers one hell of a headache. Now, it applies to people differently, of course. I hear that you've had a few dealers get in contact with you asking, what are the annual leave rules under the flexible furlough scheme?
Well, they haven't changed a lot. The annual leave still accrues as normal. I mean, in terms of accrual, there'll be no difference whatsoever, because under the previous scheme, the leave continued to accrue the same under the flexible furlough. The only difference is, as probably some of the quite a few dealers will be pleased to see, if you look at the guidelines, what they're saying is, under flexible furlough, the annual leave should be counted as furlough hours, which means they will have their 80% paid for the annual leave. The employee will have to be paid 100% for annual leave. That was the case under the previous scheme, and it's the case, remains the case under the current flexible furlough scheme, but 80% of it appears to be, can be claimed back through the furlough scheme. The only thing is, the scheme cannot be used simply to pay the annual leave. So for example, if someone is working, a mechanic is working full-time, normal regular hours, and then wants to go on annual leave, say in July, it can be put on furlough just for that reason, that the holiday pay is claimed through the furlough scheme. That is not allowed. But generally speaking, if someone's working part-time on flexible furlough, the annual leave hours should be counted as furloughed hours, and as I say, we pay back at 8%.
Yeah, yeah. What if an employee wants to take holidays on a work day? Does the employer still have to pay the normal pay?
Yes, yes. That seems to be the work day will be counted as furlough day,
right?
Because that's the whole point of it. But the holiday pay will be at normal pay, normal 100% pay, so they'll have to top it up.
Yeah, yeah. No. Do dealers have to have a new agreement with employees because of all of this, or do existing agreements still apply?
I think, Kirill, have you done some new agreements for this? I think I might have seen some.
Yes, we published the new furlough agreement, and we certainly do say that all those employees who are going to be doing some work under flexible furlough, they will require a new agreement. Those who continue to be furlough full-time, essentially, they won't be doing any work. For the time being, for as long as they stayed on furlough and doing zero work, the old agreement should suffice, because there'll be no additional requirements introduced. But what the flexible furlough say, that any work should be agreed with the employee. So that's why they will need a new agreement if they want the employee to do any work.
Okay, got you. As always, you simplify everything beautifully there. That was brilliant. Now we've had a question. I don't know if you want to turn to this one. Now we've had a question here from Graham, who says, bit of a long question. We are a small service centre, and we're trading through the lockdown, but had our reception staff and valeters on rotating furlough. We called all furlough staff back at the end of June, expecting the business would pick up. This was not the case, and now we've had to put the receptionists and valeters back on furlough. We're looking to put them all on furlough at the same time, and our technicians agreed to cover valeting and reception. As the reception staff and valeters were furloughed before, will this be okay?
That's a long question.
Yeah, I sort of follow this. I think I know the answer.
Great!
Whoa!
That was something that was sort of touched upon by the government when the flexible furlough was announced. It was rushed out in full when it had the latest direction to the Treasury. What Graham should be aware of is this concept of a high watermarking, which means under the total number the employer claims in any given period under the flexible furlough cannot be higher than the highest number claimed under the previous scheme. So which means for Graham, if it was rotating staff on furlough, so say, I don't know, if he has, say, 5 mechanics or 5 valeters as it was, and 3 receptionists, and there were sort of 2 of them, then 3 of them. Point is, not all of them at the same time under the previous scheme, and he wants to put all of them on furlough at the same time under the new scheme. They may not be allowed because he will be in excess of this high watermarking mark, which would be applied judging what was how many of them were furloughed in the previous scheme. So, as I say, he should be careful that the total number claimed for any period under the flexible furlough should not be in excess of the highest number claimed for under the previous furlough. Does it make sense, or is it sort of as long-winded as the question probably is?
Well, hopefully that answers that question.
It's complicated. That's all you need to know. Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yes.
This whole thing is complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is rather, and you mentioned, you just touched upon this briefly. You said how frustrating it can be. You have announced the sort of headline announcement, and let's say there is silence and there is sort of dripping of more info. You can imagine how frustrating it is for us legals who used to deal with the law and only have the sort of pronouncements from the government, and again, dripping of new info. And when they finally put something into regulations, that seems to be quite deviating from what was announced previously. And we can go back to what was said under the original furlough scheme announcement, that you just have to have an agreement with your employees, that'll be good. When the first direction went out, the Treasury said that, well, actually you have to have a written agreement that the employee will agree not to do any work. And then so HMRC stepped back from it and said, well, you can have some kind of evidence that was in place. It doesn't have to be necessarily written agreement as one document, etc. Then it was removed from the second version of directions. The latest one, the third version, and that's what, since March or so. So that's, you can imagine, quite a few changes. Again, they're talking about those are considered to be furloughed under the original scheme if they agreed not to do any, or if they didn't do any work for the employer, and they talk more about this concept again. So we had changes, we had a bit of lack of consistency really, which was quite a pain. And yes, it's all very complicated and changing day to day, or week to week, certainly.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness you two are here.
We'll say to that.
You don't have to answer that question, that's fine. Now, one thought that's crossed my mind here is, can an employee actually refuse to work under this flexible furlough scheme? Nona, perhaps? I don't know if you want to answer that one.
Well, we've had a lot of these sort of inquiries, and we're having inquiries where people are still a little bit scared to come back to work. Inquiries where I had a client last week where the worker, their wife works for the NHS, and all along he said, I can't come back to work. My wife is a key worker, and we can't get childcare. But the NHS workload, I think we'd have to agree, has come down. But this guy's still saying, oh, I can't come back to work. But the employer needs him back at work, you know, so he's got to come back at work. And And at the end of the day, you're employed. You know, that's your contract and you've got to work. Yes, it's all been very nice if you've enjoyed your furlough time off, which I'm sure a lot of people have from there. But ultimately, you've got to come back to work. You just can't have these excuses in place. Yeah, they might have been reasons earlier on, but everybody's kind of going back to work now. The childcare is back out there, the schools are going back. And what would you do normally when in the school holidays, for example? So with school holidays, you can't just say, oh, I haven't got childcare. Well, you wouldn't have had normally in the school holiday time. So what do you normally do to work around that? You know, and the parents kind of got to share it really. But, you know, there's lots of these sort of questions and nuances where there are people that are coming up with reasons not to come back to work. But ultimately, you're employed to do a job. And if your employer needs you back, you've got to go back to work.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose if this particular employee, well, not this particular one, but if an employee continued to refuse to come back to work, it would have to be escalated to, well, a disciplinary, and you have to go down that route.
Yeah, or you say to them, are you saying you're leaving then because you can't come to work? You know, take COVID away. You can't just say, oh, well, I've got this, I've got that. I can't come into work for a month or a week or whatever. That's just not how work operates. And we are getting back to normal now. And employers have had a lot of sympathy, I think, for their employees. And as I said before, the government, Matt Hancock and Boris, are all saying employers have got to work with their employees. We're sure they will. I say those sound bites don't particularly help the situation. But ultimately, you know, if a business needs you back, you need to be back. And yeah, it'll either be a disciplinary or you'll have to have a conversation to say, well, you know, if you can no longer work for us, then, you know, perhaps you're going to hand your notice in.
Yeah, yeah.
Difficult conversations. I wouldn't recommend anybody does that without talking to us first, because all of these, there's going to be very slightly different facts on all of these. So there isn't a one size fits all answer for any of this.
No,
so
sure.
you definitely need to call in and have a chat with us and talk through just to make sure they don't drop themselves in a horrible employment tribunal potential hole, because they don't want that.
No. You know, conversely, you know, the example we were just talking about there is clearly an employee who is in contact with their employer saying, look, I don't want to come back to work, you know, etc., etc. On the other hand, you could have an employee who has gone completely AWOL, who has been on furlough, and the employer is actually having difficulty contacting the employee. Where does the employer stand in that instance? I mean, if you cannot get hold of that person, do you just write that person off as, okay, they've left the business?
Well, at some point you're going to have to, if you really can't get hold of them and you keep trying. Because remember, in the furlough letters that we were telling our clients to send out, it reminded them that, you know, when you're called back from furlough, you've got to come back from furlough. That was a term of going on, being put on the furlough scheme. But yeah, we have had people that have disappeared and employers can't get hold of them. So they've got to write to them and say, you know, we're going to have to assume that you've resigned. Please contact us within the next 7 days if you haven't. But again, there could be all sorts of different facts in there that need considering. And yeah, employers really need to talk to us and just talk through the detail. But very generally speaking, if you can't get hold of your employee and they're not turning up, they're not there, you have to assume at some point they've left.
Yeah, yeah. We've had a question here, which is, oh, sorry, carry on.
I just wanted to be, I totally agree with Norna, and I would certainly advise, there will be a point when someone will be deemed to have resigned, but I would say don't jump to that conclusion prematurely. As Norna explained, try to get in touch. If you come here, you can't get hold of your employee, then yes, there may be grounds to assume that they've resigned. But say if they, on the day of the lockdown, say it was announced, they just left and said, well, it's not safe for me to remain here and I have to self-isolate, and then they don't come back, I would certainly say try to get in touch with them first. And if you still can't get hold of them, then yes, there will be a time, most likely, when you can treat that as a resignation. But don't jump to that conclusion, because that may cause you some difficulty. Certainly do try to get in touch with your employee first. Sorry.
No, feel free to jump in. A bit of a similar question here, but it'd be nice if we can cover it. John 180, I'm guessing that's not his real name, says, one of our mechanics went home when the lockdown started saying it was not safe for him to work for us and he needed to self-isolate. We have not heard anything from him since. Can we just say that he resigned? I know you've just already spoken about that. But he says, we cannot put him on furlough now as he was not furloughed before. We just paid him sick pay.
I'll probably answer that. That's okay. Yes, I would certainly say do try to get hold of your employee or your mechanic first before assuming that he just resigned. If he just said to you, well, I don't think it's safe working here and I need to self-isolate, then they paid him on sick. Well, the self-isolation, I think at most will have to go for 14 days or so. Did they give you any digital sick note saying they are self-isolating, or did they in fact, went in touch with their GP and then sent you another sick note from the GP or what have you? So do try to get in touch. Don't assume they've resigned. And again, sort of going on over the tangent a little bit here, but at the same time, if your health and safety practices are questioned, be prepared for this. And do follow the published guidelines, which I again say it's not particularly onerous now, as the restrictions are fewer and fewer now. But make sure you do follow them, so the employee cannot look back and say, well, I did say to you it wasn't safe working at a workshop or whatever it is. You didn't listen to me. Be prepared to say, well, you're not right, because we follow the official guidelines. That's there. Foster, we practice social distancing, etc., etc. But again, don't assume that your employee resigned. Do try to get hold of them.
Okay, brilliant. Let's just move on to the topic of redundancies. It's a desperately sad situation for dealers. I'm sure many dealers are facing the unpleasant task of having to weigh up whether to make an employee redundant. Question here from Richard, who says, we have had to make some redundancies. Can I use furlough to pay notice pay and redundancy pay?
Right, well, they have to make a distinction between notice pay and payment in lieu of notice. Right. So if you're finishing their employment there and say, we're giving you 4 weeks payment in lieu of notice, that cannot be claimed under furlough, because the rules, although it's not in the furlough rules, we've had to refer back to the Employment Rights Act. And that says notice pay is about while their work is continuing. So even though they're on furlough, they're not actually doing any work from an Employment Rights Act point of view. That work is continuing. So if they put them on, say, 4 weeks notice, they can claim furlough for those 4 weeks, but not if they want to pay it as a 4-week lump sum payment in lieu of notice. So they need to avoid pile-on and just say, we're going to pay you 4 weeks notice, so they can. But as for redundancy pay, no, that cannot come out of furlough. That has to come out of the company funds. That's calculated as a brilliant government calculator online, because a lot of people are ringing up saying, well, how much? And they're trying to work it out themselves. But there's a government calculator, gov.uk, redundancy calculator. You put the figures in there and it will tell you how much that redundancy is. But very generally, it's a week for every year they've been there up to the age of 41. And then you age at age 41, apparently, and then you start getting a week and a half for every year you are there. And on that, the other main question that we're getting is what to base the weekly pay on, because the calculator asks you their start date, their end date, what their weekly pay is. And people have said, is it the weekly pay for the last 12 weeks? Which, if people have been on furlough, that will obviously be at 80%. Yeah. And again, we've gone back to the Employment Rights Act to look at that. And it's the last 12 weeks worked, really, if anyone's on a variant. You've got to go back before furlough and give them their pay at the rate they were earning when they were working, not when they were furloughed.
Yeah.
Again, there's a few subtle nuances around that as well. But generally, yes, you can use furlough to pay notice, but not as a lump sum pile-on payment in lieu of notice period, as long as you keep their employment open for that notice period.
Yeah. Brilliant. Because there will be some dealers who have never been in this situation before, so go to the the Gov website, use the payment calculator. If they're not sure, then get in touch with companies such as yourselves, because this is, especially with this thing of weeks worked, which is different from the furloughed weeks. Employers could be on slightly dodgy ground here.
Yeah, and it's really important to get that right for there. And of course, if someone's not been with you 2 years, you don't have to go through the redundancy process. You can just let them go. They don't get a redundancy payment either. So this is only for people that have been with you more than 2 years who will get some sort of redundancy payment at the company. And I think we've seen a lot of companies where anyone that's been left there less than 2 years, unfortunately, now the people that have gone, because it doesn't cost the company anything to do that. So it very much depends where the company is financially and how they can sort of move their workforce around. But unfortunately, for those people that haven't been employed for more than 2 years, they don't have the right to go to an employment tribunal, and that is why it's easier to let them go than somebody that's been with you longer.
Yeah, sure. Brilliant. Okay, well, we've this is an issue that we've covered last week, but it's an important one to actually talk about again. Now, it's about test drives. Obviously, up to now, dealers have they've had to offer unaccompanied test drives, and for many dealers, they've quite enjoyed that. For other dealers, it's been a heart in the mouth moment. They've been very worried about doing it. Of course, some dealers haven't been able to do it because their insurance policies haven't covered them for it. What is the guidance now? Can customers take? Can the salesperson actually sit in the car with the customer on the test drive? Has that all changed?
Yeah, well, we're taking our guidance from the driving instructors and driving examiners guidance that was issued. They were back at work on the 4th of July. And obviously it's a like for like situation, isn't it, from there? So we would say, yes, I think that is fine now. But again, dealers will have to revisit their COVID risk assessments and have a look at that. Because during the day, their salesman might end up perhaps wearing face shields, but you don't want to wear that when you're in a car in case the airbag goes off.
Yes.
So not no to a shield in a car, but yeah, probably face mask. I think driving examiners have to wear face coverings of some kind. Driving instructors have the choice. So again, I think it's going to come down to the individual to decide whether they want to wear a face covering or not. But they talk about things like having the window open where possible, certainly not using recirculating air conditioning, spraying the car down. I don't know if you've been to the hairdressers yet, James, since they've
Not
been...
yet, no.
I have, so it's on there, but they're spraying everything down. You get up from the base and you go and have your hair washed, they spray that down. You get up from the hair wash, you spray that down. So it's all those things will have to be done to the car, but I don't see a reason why they can't do accompanied test drives now. But again, it's got to go back in that COVID risk assessment, just so it's clear to everybody what they're doing from there. But yeah, avoid face shields if you're driving because of the airbag issue.
And I'm sure there plenty of dealers have been in the awkward situation, not just now, but in the past few weeks, where a customer has wanted to buy a car and they want to take a test drive, but they want to have somebody with them. And are you going to let that customer walk out of the showroom by not offering them an unaccompanied test drive? Hopefully now, it's going to make it a bit more clear. But as we keep talking about, there hasn't been proper, clear guidance on this, and many dealers are having to sort of make up the decisions themselves.
Yeah, I think that's how it is. But I think the driving examiner, driving instructor guidance is pretty much how it's going to be. I think if we follow that, I don't think you can go far wrong from there, even though it's not been industry specific to us. I think that's probably good enough, I think.
Yeah. What do you think about this story that came out over the weekend about Boris Johnson saying that in retail spaces, people are going to have to start wearing masks? Of course, he implied that on Saturday or whenever it was. The government still haven't confirmed that as of Monday lunchtime. We're told there's maybe something happening this week. A dealer's going to, if that does come into place, a dealer's going to have to really change the way they work, or is it they're going to have to change their guidance and the things that they tell their staff, or is it just going to be a simple use your common sense type of scenario?
I would think a dealership is going, because they're going to have less people in a dealership at any time compared to a food shop or another type of shop, I think. So I guess the government are going to weigh up what the risk is. So whether that's going to be mandatory in car dealerships where you're not going to have a lot of people inside at one time, I say we don't know. I mean, it could be that the sales staff ended up wearing face shields, apart from when they're on test drives, and you ask customers to wear face coverings. But again, until we get something that's a bit more clear, We just don't know at the moment. But I would think perhaps car showroom is going to be slightly different because of just the volume of people that will be in there compared to going on the underground or going in a food shop, for example, or wherever. So, but it's a wait and see again, I think. And Michael Gove was sort of saying no, Boris was saying yes, and it's like, can we have a unified message, please? I mean, we've already got different rules for Wales, for Scotland. So yeah, a unified message would be good, but at the moment, there isn't one.
Yeah. Finally, I just want to talk about local lockdowns. Now, this is an issue that which me and you have been talking about over the past couple of weeks, again, because there wasn't much clarity, particularly with Leicester when the lockdown was announced. I know on that particular Monday, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was it 2-3 weeks ago? There was a lot of confusion about whether car dealerships were actually closing their doors at 5 p.m. on that Monday afternoon, or whether they're allowed to remain open. I think the view is now they can carry on working during lockdown. But again, there wasn't clear guidance on the businesses that were affected. Is this what we're saying to dealers now? Just carry on, really?
Yeah, I think at the moment, certainly Leicester, because it referred to those shops that opened on the 15th of June or whatever that date was, will have to go back into lockdown. Of course, car dealers opened earlier. So that's why we said, well, as far as we're concerned, car dealers aren't in that group of shops that had to close on the 15th of June, so they can carry on. But again, the headline was like, all retail places have to close down. We're like, well, hang on a minute. But then if you look at the Leicester Gov website, it literally said the shops that opened on the 15th of June. So that meant, yes, car dealers were fine to carry on. And again, that might feed into the issue about the masks. They are treated slightly differently to retail shops, where there's a lot of people in there. So we'll see. But each lockdown will probably have slightly different rules, I think. But yeah, the devil is in the detail, as with everything law, really.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you both. Thank you very much for taking time out today to talk to us. If dealers want to talk about the issues that we've just spoken about or anything else, what's the best way they can contact you? Presumably the website, lawgistics.co.uk, is that the first port of call for them?
Yeah, that's there. We're on email, info at, and obviously they can phone in, because we've always got an advisor on the legal helpline every day, so that's manned every day. And the questions are now, we're starting to get questions back to consumer questions now. So sort of it was furlough, commission, redundancy, and we're seeing a small return to normal now with my customer wants to return my car, which is quite refreshing actually, because it's a sign that we're going back to normal, I think. So brilliant.
Okay, super. So yeah, the website's there, the helpline, the phone number's there. Get in touch with them if you have got a query. Like I say, we're gonna have to leave it there, I'm afraid. On Wednesday, we've got Matt Cleveley from Cleveley Motors and Cleveley EV. And on Friday, we're gonna be talking to the Scottish Motor Trade Association. That's gonna be particularly interesting because, as we know, Scotland has been 3 or 4 weeks behind England. And we just wanna have a little chat with Sandy Burgess, the chairman of that organisation, to find out what's going on in Scotland at the precise moment in time. If you want to be on Car Dealer Lives, then please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk, or James Baggott. He's available at james@blackballmedia.co.uk. That's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you Wednesday. Bye-bye.